striving and thriving in the COVID world. All of us are familiar with the striving part. We're living it every day. But it's interesting how many businesses have also managed to thrive in this period. And we have 5 panelists today who will tell us about the challenges they have faced over the last month, the choices they have made, and how they see the future. I am Kannan Sitaram, venture partner at Fireside Ventures, and I'll be moderating this session. Our panelists today are Hari Menon, CEO of Bigbasket, Sahil Barua, CEO of Delhivery, Vivek Gupta, CEO of Licious, PC Musthafa, CEO of ID Foods, and Kanwaljit Singh, managing partner at Fireside Ventures and a long-term investor in India's food startups. We'll be running the panel discussion for about an hour, after which we'll have time for some questions. We have already received several questions, and for those who have more to ask, as the webinar progresses, you can enter them in the Q&A box that you can see on your screen. Or if you find a question that's already been asked, then vote it up. So the team processing the questions will give priority to those who have the questions which have more audience interest. Panelists can also answer directly questions that have been asked of them from their own devices as well. So I'm going to kick off now, and I'm starting with you, Hari. E-commerce players like Bigbasket have come in for a lot of comment after the lockdown. Consumers are saying they're not finding slots. Companies are saying that their brands are not active. Now, you have been through a very difficult time. So is this criticism unfair?
Well, I can't say whether it's fair or unfair. I mean, I think consumers, what they're saying is valid, because obviously they're not getting slots, and that's real and that's true. But if you look at it from our perspective, it may not be valid. But let me just not worry about all that. It's important to just give you the perspective of what's happening. If I just go back, March 22nd, when we had the first Janta lockdown, which happened then. Just a day before, actually, we had all the permissions to actually operate. Unfortunately, actually, it didn't go down, to the local level. And so when we started working that morning, we were asked to shut down very, very quickly. Including crazy stuff that happened in terms of atrocities and stuff like that. But I don't want to go too much into that. So we had to literally stop everything on that day, and because of everything that happened, there was also a general fear that got created amongst our entire workforce. And so what it resulted in is that over the next 2 days, a lot of them actually just left town. For various reasons. They were worried about what happened to their colleagues on that Sunday. They were also worried about what this whole pandemic is all about. How is it going to pan out? And so they just vanished, actually, over the 2-day window. And it was just after that the lockdown got announced. So essentially, what happened was that we were not operating at all, at a very, very small capacity over those 3 days. And when the lockdown got announced, we had to actually start working because essentials were allowed. And that's something that the government really, really worked well with. And I haven't seen something like this ever, is that they essentially got us up and running in about 2 days. Actually, decisions were just taken across meetings, across calls like these, across video meetings like these. And they really, really moved really fast and got us up and running. So that's what happened, and because of which we actually had a huge backlog. We had to actually get over the backlog, because each day lost is that many orders that we've not been able to service, and it's locked down. So people are worried. They can't even go out. They can't do their normal stuff, and so there was a lot of angst amongst people. The single biggest thing that really hit us is people, and I'm just coming straight to the point. We were completely geared on infrastructure, thankfully, because over the last 1 year, we had invested quite a bit on infra, huge amount of infra, and that is becoming very useful for us right now. we had absolutely no issues on supplies because, our farmer partners, all the mills, the FMCG companies, we're carrying enough stocks at that point in time. So supplies was never an issue. And so the single biggest issue that hit us hard was people. And so what really happened was that, of course, in the meantime, just to quickly jump to your second question, saying, where a lot of companies, keep telling us even now that we're not carrying their products. And that's the reason being that we had to only switch completely to essentials, right? And so a 38,000, range of SKUs, we brought it down to about 3,500. And that's what we did because we only carried essentials. The other reason that we had to further bring it down to, in some cities, to almost 2,000 SKUs, to some cities 2,500, was the shortage of people. And when I say shortage of people, it's people across the board, including warehouses and stuff like that. Because if you have shortage of people in the warehouse, you can't receive, you can't stack, you can't pick. So you have all kinds of problems. So the first thing that you do is rationalize on the SKU range even more, right? And so you bring down SKUs, that much more, and all caused by a single problem, which is people availability. So just to quickly sum up what typically happens, and it's happening today. Of course, we've scaled quite a bit. Just to give you a sense of what's happened, at the lockdown day, we were down to almost 30,000 orders that we were servicing that day. Our normal, average pre-COVID is about 150,000. And with BBD, it's with our BB daily business, it's close to about 2.5 lakhs. That 30,000 we have now scaled up to 3 lakhs right now. So that's the good side of it, and hence I think it's a little unfair in terms of the narrative that's happening, because scaling from 30,000 to 300,000, took the life out of us. Absolutely took the life out of us in terms of making sure that we get people. We had 57 partnerships at one point in time to just get people, which is the Restaurant Association of India, Retailers Association of India, garment factories, Uber, whole lot of such stuff, to make sure that we just keep ramping up from people. So what happens is every morning we set capacity. And if we set capacity, say for 100 orders, we are able to deliver 100 orders. And that's done based on number of people that report that morning to work. And our capacity is dynamic. So we can just set it, shut it, and do what we need to. Unfortunately, the demand and the surge was 5x, 6x at some points in time, right? So your capacity is 100, your surge is 6x, slots shut in 15 minutes. And that's what happens, right? And the single biggest reason was people. So people cross the border. A lot of our workforce is migrant. And so they cross the border, and even as of today, they can't come back.
So that's an amazing pullback that you have been able to achieve. Tell us a little bit more about how you had to change the way you had to run your business.
Yeah, Kannan, there is just one big thing that I learned over the last 3 weeks. Frankly, it's a huge, huge learning for me. And it is one theme and one thing that I've learned is essentially do more with less, right? A single theme. And frankly, this applies even to my personal life. Actually, I realized that if you don't adopt this, right, you will never be able to deliver in a current situation like this. So what that really meant was that we had to do a lot in terms of productivity improvement. So because you have only that many people, right? And we have to deliver more orders than we did with that many people as compared to the past. So we did a lot of tweaks on processes. So we were able to up productivity by about 23%. I mean, just to give you an exact number. So that many more orders we can deliver with lesser number of people, right? Number two, we actually decided that how do we get more and more people to utilize one slot? So we started getting people to buy together, right? We started telling people, your neighbors, people, as soon as you get a slot, please accumulate orders so that more people can be satisfied with one slot, right? Do more with less. 3, we actually quickly introduced community selling, right? Which means a whole apartment complex can actually put their orders together and place one order. But normally you would go to that complex 4, 5, 6 times a day. Now you will go to the complex 3 times a week, right? That optimizes our last mile delivery force, like crazy. So we got community, ordering that we decided to do. And like this, we innovated and did, so many things that basically helped us operate and increase, capacity by with lesser number of people, right? that was the single theme. So if I have to take out one thing over the last 4 weeks, it is this: the big learning about how do you do more with less, and keep constantly thinking about that. Because this is not going to change very easily, right? Even today morning I read, and the government says that we will not allow movement of people across borders as yet. And this problem will continue. And you will dry up in terms of number of people that you can get from within a city. And that's the single thing, Kannan, that I have taken away from this.
So do more with less is an amazing takeout, and really, I think that applies to all of us in so many different ways, Hari. In these hard times, I think the way you've been able to re-engineer processes, rethink your focus to deliver on do more with less has been just wonderful to hear. Sahil, you guys went through a huge disruption as well. The 5th, the world just changed. And yet today you're delivering back at almost 16,000 PIN codes that you were servicing prior to the lockdown. So can you tell us what kind of choices did you have to make?
Sure. So, I think Hari's covered a lot of I think he's really hit the nail on the head in terms of some of the major choices we had to make. But just to sort of rewind, on March 23rd and 24th, our network had gone from doing about 1 million orders a day across 17,500 PIN codes to 0 orders a day, effectively. We were back live in about 4,200 PIN codes on the 25th and on the 26th. And by the 29th, we were back to about 15,600 PIN codes. I think one of the things that helped us, and one of the major changes that we had to make, was the extent of liaisoning that and the extent of sort of information sharing that we had to do with local authorities. Because in our case, it's not just a problem that we had to face at the intra-city level, but also intercity. To give you an example, if you move a truck from Delhi to Bangalore, you're typically going to move through about 6 states. And each of those borders is a checkpoint that you have to negotiate. What we did very quickly was to increase the transparency of information that we were providing to local authorities. So the first thing was to get our data science teams on to the problem, to provide our own definition based on what the government had provided of what is essential and what is not. Because unlike grocery, which is really all sort of essential, when you look at e-commerce, it's sometimes not that easy to figure out what's essential and what's not. And so the choice of whether to carry or not was something that we had to make on behalf of our customers, and to inform them about whether we would be able to provide right of carriage or not. So that was really step one. B was reaching out to every single sort of police thana across the entire country, identifying ourselves, identifying our staff, identifying all of the goods that we were carrying, preloading manifests to them and saying, look, these are the items that we're carrying. That was a massive exercise, which took us probably maybe 5 or 6 days, and really also making sure, therefore, that we could get the passes to operate. So that was really the second. I'd say the third big change in our model was fundamentally in terms of, sort of pretty basic operational decisions, really, which are reasonably complex to make in low volume environments. So for instance, how do you route trucks now across the rest of the country when you discover containment zones, when you discover state borders, which are, seeing extreme delays. So figuring out how to switch our entire routing across the country and to dynamically change, the way we transit was the other big challenge for us. And of course, I think Hari's been absolutely right when he said this. I think all of us in operational businesses have really had to figure out, let me put it this way, while we've had to figure out how to do more with less, I think the lesson for us, for each of us there, is perhaps also that we were not as efficient as we thought we were. Going into this crisis, if you can ultimately do more with less, that's a sign that you should have probably done that earlier. And that's been a big learning for us as well. We've always prided ourselves on being one of the lowest cost networks in the country, and we realize we can do it, at an even lower cost than that. So bringing in a lot more software automation in our warehouses, in our hubs, for instance, are things that we've been piloting even over the last 3 weeks, sort of making sure that all of our staff knows exactly which truck to route on. All our drivers know the exact routes that they're transiting. We know all the authorities along the way have preloaded manifests. That sort of allowed us to keep going right now.
Can you clear the air about some questions that we are receiving from startup side?
Sure.
I'm hearing that Delhivery has been picking up stuff from them, but actually it's not moving from Delhivery's warehouses. We're also hearing that Delhivery has upped its prices since the lockdown. Can you clear the air around some of these?
Sure. So let me answer the second one before I answer the first one because it's easier. The second one is that we haven't upped prices. We don't have a surcharge of any kind for the coronavirus period. So the prices that existed pre-coronavirus are the prices that exist at this point in time. Of course, client volumes may have changed in this period. People who are shipping essential goods may suddenly be seeing a much larger surge in demand and therefore might actually feel like their prices should be much lower. I think that's something that we're picking up with our customers case by case and saying, okay, look, let us figure out how we can give you a more effective pricing given your volumes have changed. But otherwise, from our standpoint, it's pretty clear. We never charge a surge premium to any of our customers, whether it is this period, whether it's the Diwali period. Look, in our business, we have a surge every month because there's some kind of festival period every month. And this is just in some ways a different kind of surge. It's a different kind of economic environment. And so pricing does not change basis that. Going back to the first question in terms of delays, that is true. And I do want to point out that there's a limit to which at this point in time, any carrier has the ability to control delays happening across the network. Let me try and explain why. Like I said, when a truck goes from Delhi to Bangalore, two things have to happen. One is that given 100 kgs of load, we can't depart a 14-ton truck. It doesn't make sense economically for the customer or for us to actually try and depart a completely empty truck. Therefore, there's a certain amount of weight that has to happen for us to be able to get to a minimum viable load to transit. The second thing, of course, is that there are 5 borders between Delhi and Bangalore, each of which, despite our coordination, may take anywhere from 3 hours to 15 hours to clear. There is also a backlog of trucks which is there at most of the border crossings across the states, right? And so as a consequence of that, delays are highly variable at this point. Even at the last mile, when we happen to get to a city, I think what we've realized is that containment zones are springing up between the time that we depart a vehicle from our distribution center to the time that we reach the apartment complex. In that half an hour period, it's possible that we no longer have access to a last mile zone. And information on the ground is often sketchy and takes us a little bit of time to actually verify. So the delays do exist, that is true. I will point out though that the delays have gotten significantly better. The first week of the lockdown, which was from about the end of March to the first week of April, was terrible. We were running at less than 30% deliveries happening on time. Yesterday, if I look at our numbers, 80% of our trucks were able to manage their intercity movements at pre-lockdown turnaround times. Now, is that going to continue? I certainly hope so, but I would advise all customers who are shipping at this point in time or even ordering from platforms like a Bigbasket, for instance, is that while operationally, I think all of us are doing everything that we can to make sure that things are getting to people on time, there is a certain amount of variability inherent in the situation. And also we do have to make sure that our staff are also running safe operations. We can't send them into containment zones. We can't send them into places where they're running into battles with the police or the local authorities. And so that variability will exist. I think a little more planning, a little more patience on all sides. And from our side, of course, more transparency as we collect information. So today we are able to provide a better estimate of the delays that it will take. For instance, if you're shipping into Pune or if you're shipping into Bombay, we will provide a significantly buffered turnaround time to say, hey, look, we don't know whether we will be able to deliver, within 3 days or 2 days or 4 days or not. But otherwise, in general, I think things are getting better. And I think turnaround times have improved in the last 3 weeks.
Thank you, Sahil. That's very, very helpful. Vivek, to you now. You were looking at a great March business number for Licious. And then everything turned topsy-turvy. How is April looking?
Yeah, so I think Hari and Sahil have talked about all the operational challenges. I think it is same for everybody, people, etc. Before we jump into April, I want to talk about one thing which we did and worked very well for us is our own people safety. So that was the biggest concern. So we have 3 plants in Bangalore, Delhi, and Mumbai. How do you make sure these 600, 700 people working in plant, how do they maintain social distancing and safe from this COVID, etc. So on day 0, when the lockdown was announced, we actually put them in a safe place. So we have booked a hotel where these 600 people are staying from that day. So these people follow a stringent process of going from hotel to workplace and back, and all the food, all the safety measures are in place. So what this did is these people actually have called their references, and we have been able to hire another 300 people in last 20 days. And that has built confidence in the community, that this company is taking care of all the measures, etc. So that has been able to help us solve people. On the lockdown, during lockdown, we roughly lost around 50% of our people. So let's say we had 500 people, it became 250. And today we are back to around 1.5 times of our capacity. So 800 people are back in the system. New hiring have happened. On the new hiring also, the stringent process is any new joinee in the system cannot enter a plant for 14 days. So he goes through a training session, which is not conducted inside the plant. So we have actually set up a different training center. So that way, again, safety from, the new incoming carriers is implemented. Obviously, demand is through the roof, so we can't judge it as 5x, 6x. People are not able to get slots, etc. But there, what we do is a effective communication, so we send PMs to smaller cohorts and try to serve as many cohorts are possible. So Bangalore, for example, pre-COVID and now, we are able to deliver more than 2x of what we used to do earlier. But some cities like Noida, we have not been able to stabilize operations yet. So there are still some challenges on the ground. So it's a mixed bag of things what we have been able to do in Bangalore versus other cities. But one thing to call out, I have never seen authorities or police cooperation ever in my life like what we saw in the COVID times. The way at least communication happened in Bangalore and some of the other cities was really, really amazing. The second thing is on the food safety, which was another key thing, because meat we can't stock like we can stock some of the groceries. Meat has a perishable lifetime of like 24 hours, 36 hours. So there we face a lot of challenge with our partner vendor plants, and those plants also have lost their people. So it took us some time to stabilize that. But within Licious, because we as a brand have invested a lot on food safety, we are a globally certified food standard company. So there we actually felt that we need not to do anything new, and it's a time which has paid back, and we could see clearly consumers appreciating during this time for quality, etc., which is good for a brand. I also say, this do more with less is a learning. But one thing I want to add is necessity is mother of invention. So it just led us doing so many new things so fast, so quickly with so little people. I think so. We have implemented a new delivery design. We were an express company. Now we have moved to a slotted delivery like Bigbasket. We never built even those tech features. We have been able to do that very quickly. We have always worked on our own delivery fleet, but during this time we have worked with every single company, Yolu, Euler, DriveU, whomever we can work with, Shadowfax, etc., etc. So I think this is the time when there is no time to think, it is just time to execute hard. So things are looking very positive from that standpoint. And last thing we have done, interestingly, is I think all the employees in the system have lead lot of morale boosting, a lot of positivity around. So that is another interesting thing we have been doing at Licious. Every third day we do a town hall within our employees who are working from home, etc. Continue to give them messages, how the company is growing, how we are implementing processes on COVID, etc. I think that is another thing which we have done at Licious.
And we find that many food companies have had issues sourcing materials for their factories to run.
Yeah.
Do you find that a constraint?
On the raw material yet, yes. On not on the packaging materials, etc. I think those industries are working, and we are getting proper support. But raw materials, specifically in north of India, in Delhi side, we face a lot of challenges because some of the slaughterhouses which are run by government, etc., are not running for quite a long time. They have also lost people. So there is some challenges, but there also we are figuring out innovative solutions. We are flying a lot of raw material from Bangalore to Delhi every day. So there is a 6-hour model which Blue Dart has introduced during this time. It is costly, but I think for fellow meat lovers, it's nothing. So we are doing some of these interesting things.
So, I mean, it's wonderful. You have prioritized safety, you have looked at innovation, and you looked at customer delight while going through all the turbulence of COVID.
Yeah.
PC, over to you. How are you thriving in April, or are you striving, or both?
Sorry, I was on mute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So we did our best performance in March. I think we will improve that in April. People like Bigbasket did not support us. That is true. they were not delivering fresh. But then we had to figure out our own way of doing it. We were an offline company. We were 97% of my revenue was coming from retail businesses, around 30,000 outlets. Now the biggest challenge was, most of the stores were closed, or there was long queue in front of the stores, or when you walk into the store, there was no stock left. I think that's where we looked at it as a opportunity rather than a crisis, and then quickly implemented or did a turnaround from an offline business to a mix of online and offline. In a span of just 4 days, we implemented a new product called Store Finder on our platform, on our website, wherein customers can search for open stores in their vicinity, identify the list of open stores today, and then identify the stock position, as well as get an SMS alert when the fresh happens. So turnaround. What we have learned from this whole thing is Hari, Vivek covered most of it, but that I have learned is work. N number of things planning doesn't work, right? Many things that we were doing was wrong. Opportunity for us to learn, opportunity for me to learn. All those, necessary things that we're doing in the business should have been cut off. I think crisis, I'm expecting at least a 30% increase and at least a 50% profitability, because unnecessary things will go off. This will teach us a lesson, improve efficiency in the business. Get it done. I think we were lucky to some extent. More staff on dormitory kept all the necessary mechanism in place to ensure employees are safe and isolated in our dormitory. We things to conference for the employees, or to bring employees. One, of course, mechanisms put in place, is done. But two more things. One, we got doctors speak to the employee and clarify. There were a lot of misconceptions, right? So, professional talk to employees directly.
PC, I'm sorry, I think your voice is breaking. Can you
hear me, Ra?
You may want to switch off the video and try talking.
Okay, is it better now?
Slightly better, yes.
Okay, so I was telling you about what else we did. One, we did ensure that our employees meet with the doctors over Zoom, of course, and they clarify a lot of doubts and clear those misconceptions. Another thing that we did is these employees, their families were worried, so we got and we talked to the families of the employees. We communicated with the families of the employees and took them into confidence. So those things really helped us. Overall, I think, Kannan, this could be a crisis or a challenge. If you start considering it as a crisis, you will regret for that in future. But if we consider it as a challenge, we businessmen would identify opportunity to innovate during this time. And I think this is the best time to innovate.
Well, I think that's an excellent point that you're making about this is a great time to innovate. We've been hearing both from Vivek and from Hari that there are a whole sort of new partnerships which have happened as a result of all this chaos, right? People partnering with different delivery partners, looking at how to recruit from different people, et cetera, et cetera. What's been your thought in the area of fresh partnerships?
Is it to me?
PC, yes. PC, yes.
Hello.
Yeah, PC.
Karan, was it to me?
Yeah, it was to you, PC. Maybe again, turn off the video. Yeah.
Sorry. I think my network is weak. I will switch on my.
I think you should.
Karan, looks like my network is weak. Can't hear you.
Perhaps you switch off the video. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Could you
Is
hear?
it better now? Can you please repeat?
Yeah,
Yes.
I understand.
Sorry, I'm in a village, so my network is very weak.
No worries. I was saying that there are a lot of fresh partnerships that come up over the last month. Vivek talked about that, and so did Hari. Did you also look at partnerships, different ways of connecting with consumers, reaching stuff to consumers?
Yeah, so for example, we partnered with Cloud Kitchen of Swiggy to get the product delivered direct to home, right? We partnered with some of the RWS, Residents Welfare Associations, for them to consolidate the orders, aggregate the orders and give it to us. We then, deliver to RWS, Residents Welfare Associations. So those kind of partnership yes work.
Interesting. Thanks, PC. Before I go to Kanwal, just one more question of you, Sahil.
Sure.
We have heard from many people, Sahil, that during the last month, in order to make sure that deliveries are made, they have gone off COD. They switched off COD as an option. What has been your view on that? How you approach COD?
So Kannan, we continue to support COD as well as non-COD. Obviously, our preference at this time and our advice to all of our customers is that they operate on non-COD as much as possible, because that at least allows us to do a much more effective contactless delivery. But I do think it's important to understand that there are large portions of India who don't have the ability to pay using either a credit card or a debit card or a mobile at the point of delivery. And so it's not realistic and it's not consistent with our desire to be able to provide our service to anybody who requires it to say that we will ban a certain payment method. Our staff, of course, when they're going out for delivery are fully equipped and fully trained. So they're carrying masks, they're wearing gloves, they are carrying sanitizers, they're trained. We measure the temperature before they go out. And obviously, once they come back, we redo all of these things. So we are trying to keep it as safe as possible. So far, I'm happy to report that we haven't had in our field team, our delivery agent team, any cases of coronavirus anywhere at this point. But as far as COD goes, my advice to most companies is to say, if you have a customer base which has the ability to pay online or has the ability to pay at delivery, by all means, please incentivize them to do so, and we will certainly make sure that that can be done. But the reality of India is that there is a large portion of people who cannot pay any other way than by cash. And so we do have to, as a delivery service provider providing essential services, we cannot switch that off. And it's just not the right thing to do.
I think that's a great way to think about how to manage the whole payment context. Kanwal, over to you. In the last few conversations, we have heard some very powerful and very effective leadership in action. People who are not just managing disruption, but actually thriving in the middle of all the chaos. And you have been talking to a lot of people as well. What are your top takeouts of all that you've been hearing? What advice are you giving to startups?
So, Kannan, I think we are talking to probably the captains of what I would call the startup world. People like Vivek and PC and others. They have built very exciting businesses. They have got significant credibility, and more importantly, money in the bank to execute. But if you step down to the real, early stage startup environment, the issues are actually multifold. I mean, clearly the first issue has always been about survival. So, how do we even manage this next 3 to 6 months and the uncertainty of how long this will stay? And what I found personally is that not just from our portfolio, but a lot of people that I've spoken to, there is significant amount of resilience. I think people have been, a lot of startups, founders have called me up, we have had conversations. And I find that, there is almost like this very strong, in fact, some of them have used words like, we started with nothing, we bootstrapped it, and, we are going to come out of this with as much, tighter belts as we can. So I would say that do more with less for young startups is almost like a daily mantra. I mean, it's almost like, there is no choice but to optimize. But what my biggest learning was, and we call it leadership, we call it resilience, we call it entrepreneurial skill, jugaad, whatever. But that was the first thing. I think second thing that we have been advising companies in our portfolio and outside is first of all think survival. I mean, clearly, be brutal about questioning every element of cost, every assumption on growth, every scenario, and entrepreneurs are by definition and rightfully so very optimistic. So how do you make sure that you bring in at least the concept of scenario planning, of thinking about what if in 3, 4, 5 different possibilities, and what do you need to figure that out? I think so that's been one theme across the board. And I must say, really, both very proud of the fact that, that's the generic message I've seen across startups. And of course, I have the privilege of working closely with PC and Vivek, and I've seen how they are, on a ground level basis managing it. So that's the first critical thing for me. Second is, I think, just the customer centricity. So some of the examples that we heard just now, flying meat from Bangalore to Delhi because, you are willing to take the cost and reach the customers, doing apartment level collaboration and so on and so forth. I find that a lot of the companies, and food is an essential category. 70% of our companies are today zero revenue because we don't deal with essential services. That's a different problem to solve. But even companies who have the immediate capability, they are not the first on the list. So today, if you see the performance, and I'm sure Hari and Sahil will vouch for me, it's really the bigger established players who are coming back much stronger. They have stronger execution capabilities. They have better supply chain control. And this is a worldwide phenomenon. We have been, tracking performances of companies, and naturally so it's the incumbents, the trust that the brands have built and so on. So it's a double whammy for the startups in how they are going to deal with it. So I think the aspect of new channels, new models, working with every possible avenue, I think that's really what is coming out in a very positive way. So every small sliver of hope, I think our startups are taking advantage of that. Whether it is these new models of supplying from grocery stores to online capabilities or apartment collaboration and so forth. I've even seen, for example, restaurants and a lot of the smaller players in the food space actually reaching out and coming and delivering, ready food, not through Swiggy, but through in their own cars and in their own, vehicles, just to, provide some kind of relief. So I think that's the second piece. And third is this whole collaboration in the ecosystem. And I find that, again, notwithstanding some of the questions you asked earlier, for example, Sahil reached out proactively to us and wanted to check if we could work with our portfolio companies. Now, knowing today that the demand for logistics is so high, there is no reason for Sahil to want to do that if there is enough and more business for him to engage with. Similarly with Bigbasket, similarly with Swiggy. So I think my own feeling is that the ecosystem is realizing how important it is to collaborate and actually work with each other. What I haven't seen yet, and I hope fondly that there is a possibility where CPG companies among themselves will start collaborating. So I don't know whether we can use the ID network or the Licious network to start delivering some products in the market. And those are the kind of things which I feel will be game changers as we go forward. So those are the early observations that at least we are seeing in the market, and I'm really excited about how the ecosystem is coming together. Of course, life is difficult and companies are still struggling, but to me there is a very strong light at the end of the tunnel.
It's a very interesting observation you make about collaboration, because I've been talking to people in several large companies, and unlike in the past, they've been remarkably free with sharing knowledge, experiences, how to do things. So you're so right that I think in this difficult time, people are reaching out to each other, people are willing to step up and help. And I think that's a great takeout for all the startups in the audience today. Interestingly, we have about 1,400 people tuned into this webinar. So it's a large group of people who are listening to all of you. And I think this is one of the things they should be taking home to say, hey, feel free to reach out, because there will be partnerships out there, which may not have worked in earlier times, but in today's situation, I think everything is open to new ideas. That's a great thought.
And Kannan, may I just add a point again, more as an appeal to not just Hari and Sahil who are here, but also, all the other partners who really can help some of our younger companies, is how do they engage even closer with the, ecosystem players, whether it is delivery, whether it is, the networks, e-commerce, the local delivery capabilities. I think fundamentally, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later, there is going to be a move significantly towards more, virtual delivery, more online other business models. And this is a great time for not only for our companies to start thinking about that, but also for some of the ecosystem players to step forward and provide some, support to these companies, saying, we understand that, you are going to need more e-capabilities, and is there a way ecosystem can collaborate for that?
Let me switch gears a little bit. We've been so far really spending time on the last month and what has been the response of all of you to that, and what kind of lessons you guys are drawing out. I want to now move to May 4th and thereafter. And I want to get your views on how you see the world shaping up. What are going to be the pressure points and what are going to be the opportunities? What are the changes that you guys are going to be making as we head out to May 4th is really what I want to explore over the next 20 minutes or so. And again, Hari, let me start with you. Kanwal said, look, the whole e-commerce, e-tailing is going to see a step jump even after May 4th. What is your view?
No, absolutely. I completely agree with Kanwal, and I just want to also add or give my assurance, in terms of what Kanwal was asking. But before I get to that, I think the world is going to change and start moving completely online, because I think that's what we will see, post-COVID. That's one. I think we'll also see a lot of significant, some not significant, some changes in buying behavior, right? We are very clear that, for example, the community, buying will continue, right? People will start using that as a better method. And, if we actually use some more technology for things like, the last mile segregation to their respective houses and stuff like that, I think it will become a great option to, for people to adopt, so that, the whole thing just comes there 3-4 times a week and you're done, which means if essentially you're shifting out, essentially you're just shifting out, from quick deliveries, fast deliveries, express deliveries to more convenient ways of actually delivering. So that we'll see some behavior changes that, that will take place. Just coming back to Kanwal's question, Kanwal, I think it's just a matter of time. It's a few more days. The whole reason that, we haven't been able to carry, and I'm actually, frankly, just don't know why we haven't supported the PC. I have no clue. We should have. It's an absolute essential. Maybe the drive to sell our own private label, maybe, but that's not part of my philosophy. But I will check. So coming back, so I think it's fundamentally non-essentials will come back, and I think it's just a matter of time, matter of a few more days, when we will be allowed to do that. So why have we done 3,000 SKUs, 4,000 SKUs? Because they're essentials. The second reason that we'll battle with, and that's my thing that we need to put some serious thinking into it, is that we have done more with less, which also means that we've managed to do what we have to do with a restricted assortment. But when this goes back to 38,000, which it will very soon, it's just a matter of the government releasing that that bit. Then we'll need to figure out how we are going to manage that with the continued restricted workforce, right? Until that opens up, right, we will still have a problem, because a larger range puts a lot of pressure on our our respective distribution centers and our warehouses in terms of picking, in terms of receiving and stuff like that, especially the long tail. But we will scale up on that, and my view is that we will be up and running. My BB Accelerate team, which is the launchpad for Bigbasket in terms of launching new brands, etc., is just eager and keen to just get back and start work again, right? They're already doing a lot of background work, already talking to a lot of potential new startups, right? Who are away, ready there, so that all the background work is done. And as soon as the government opens this up, we will get all of them back.
So that's great news for startups, that you're really already stepping out, encouraging them to come back and onboard new startups as well onto the platform. And really, it's almost like BB Accelerate 2 that I think you'll be creating, because there are so many different opportunities that you see coming up going forward. What are the pressure points, Hari?
The pressure point continues to be availability of people, Kannan. I'm just harping on this so much that sadly we are very, very people dependent, and it's good in a way, because we are obviously creating jobs and and creating such opportunities. But unless we scale up to the potential business, right, we will always be lagging behind. The business is demand is going to surge. There's no question about it, right? It's our ability to meet that. COVID has other issues in terms of blockages, stoppages. I'm assuming that as we go along, a lot of those things will settle down very quickly. I think what India has done in terms of the lockdown has been fantastic. So we'll see results of that coming in. I'm not too worried. Pune will close today. Hyderabad is struggling a bit today. All this will happen. So that we need to learn how to manage, right? But that's not going to be what's going to continue in future. We need to get people, and until and unless borders open for migrant labor to start coming back and working, we'll always be constrained, right? And that constraint will hold us back from adding new SKUs, new products, getting in new people, and scaling capacity. That's my single biggest thing. While there are concerns that the government is having in bringing them back, and we fully appreciate that, I think until that opens up, even if it opens up in a restricted, controlled manner, it will help us a lot.
Lots of new players have come into the home delivery business over the last month. But once the lockdown lifts, is there going to be room for everybody, or do you see overcapacity? You're going to have again a war of survival?
Kannan, here is a number I love giving, right? We are a $700 billion industry, the grocery business, $700 billion, right? Online is 1% today, less than 1%, right? Modern trade is 3.5%, 4%. Both put together is 5%. And each are individually, a lot of them are billion-dollar businesses, right? More, multiple billion-dollar businesses, right? Individually. But all of that put together is 5%, right? You're expecting, and there is an expectation, and that I think will happen, that 1% would become 15, 20%, 30%, right? Look at what we are talking in terms of in terms of numbers, right? So that's the kind of scale that one needs to look at and be prepared to build, right? And that is my worry, right? In terms of how quickly are we going to scale that number? 1% becoming 20, 30%. Today, the expectation is that it becomes 50%, which means overnight you're expected to become a $300 billion, $400 billion business, which is so difficult.
Interesting. So you think that there is room for all?
Yes.
And the more the merrier?
Yes. Grocery has always been like that. It's never been a 1-2 player business. Never been. never be globally.
Moving to you, Sahil. Are we really going to see a sort of a real post-COVID world, and or is it all going to be like Hari said, Hyderabad now, Pune then, lockdowns, opening ups? What's your view, and how are you gearing up Delhivery to handle that worldview?
So I think Hari is right, and the fact that it's Pune today and Hyderabad tomorrow is not something that has arisen just because of coronavirus. This has always been a challenge of operating in India, at least for the last 10 years that we have been doing it. Something or the other is always happening across the country that you have to deal with operationally. I think the world has changed already. I think, and there are a few things that, at least from our perspective, we will call out. I think the first thing that you will see, at least in industries like logistics, is that you will see a massive need and a massive shift towards scale. One of the major problems that India faces, and one of the reasons why supply chains are in the shambles that they are in today, is because India does not have scale supply chain players. The fact of the matter is, when the largest logistics company in the country is $400 million, attempting to service nearly $1 trillion of consumption, the reality is that maintaining operational fidelity at a time like this is impossible. And so I think you will see that there will be a massive expansion of scale, first of all. I think the second thing that we will see is a lot of companies will figure out during this period that there are direct routes to consumer. So far, a lot of companies have been relying on various channels, whether online or offline, to actually reach their consumers. And I think more and more companies will now realize they can take a direct path. And so one of the big shifts will be logistics companies and technology companies figuring out how to enable brands, how to enable sort of new startups to reach their customers more directly. So I think that's going to be the second big shift that we're going to see. The third is a little more contentious, and I know I'm perhaps sticking my neck out here a little bit. I think this does raise interesting questions about whether a model of the gig economy even works in a country like India. The reality is that, one of the major reasons we've been able to retain a large portion of our workforce is that they're salaried employees of Delhivery. They're guaranteed their pay, they're guaranteed their provident fund, they're guaranteed insurance, and they're taken care of exactly as all other employees in the company are. I think we are seeing situations where the most vulnerable sections of society are the ones who are losing their jobs at this point in time and are under threat. And so I think you're going to see a change in the underlying labor models that exist in India in the first place. There's going to be a much greater focus on safety and security of staff. There's going to be, hopefully, much more focus on benefits being provided to people who are actually out there and delivering at the last mile, and staff in warehouses, staff in trucking terminals. Something that historically hasn't been the case. So I think that also is going to be a big shift overall in terms of how companies think about their supply chains. In terms of the recovery, very briefly, Kannan, I think let me put it this way, my optimism is perhaps U-shaped. I'm optimistic about the immediate term opening on May 4th, for non-essentials, a little less optimistic about the medium term, more optimistic about the long term. I think the reality is there's a lot of pent-up demand, and that pent-up demand will resurface immediately on the 4th of May. And you will, assuming of course that we open up on the 4th of May, and that pent-up demand will take maybe 2 or 3 months to sort of clear out of the system. I do think though that the medium-term pressures are real and larger than we are perhaps able to imagine at this point in time. For instance, when we have been talking to airport operators, when we have been talking to fleet operators across the country, I'm not sure that that in the medium term they will be able to return to normal course of operations, and so we will see a massive depression of capacity in the medium term. In the short term, it will work. In the first 2 or 3 months, while demand picks up, we will be able to service somehow or the other. But I do think the medium term will be challenging, and it will require sort of long-term systemic changes. The very long term, of course, as Hari has pointed out, I think the secular trend to e-commerce, the secular trend to direct-to-consumer, the secular trend to scale, these will exist. And so the long term, there's several reasons to be optimistic. But to all of our customers, of course, our advice has been, in the near term, expect demand to surge, expect that there will be a sort of pent-up demand that we will have to clear out. In the midterm, be very careful, because the reality is that all of these supply crunches and all of the reorganization is going to hit you, 6 months to 2 years out. And then in the long term, if you can survive that period, then you should be fine.
And are you suggesting any sort of process changes to your clients so that the whole network can work more effectively?
I have vested interest when I answer this question, but I hope that I speak on behalf of everybody in logistics over here. One is outsource more. This is precisely the reason why you should outsource more. These are precisely the events that should require you to outsource more, unless, of course, you're running a highly specialized and very, very different model like a Bigbasket, right? Where, of course, they are the most efficient player because they're also the largest player in that space. But otherwise, thinking that you can, develop a large-scale pan-India 16,000 pin code, million order a day sort of logistics network and run it efficiently may not be the best use of your capital. There might be better things to spend it on. As an example, I know there are a number of online companies who had nothing to do with grocery who are suddenly starting to sell grocery. And our advice to them has been, why are you doing this either? This makes no sense. Just because you can acquire consumers doesn't mean you can sell grocery. Just because you can ship orders doesn't mean that you can scale up at this point in time. So our advice to all our customers is integrate with your logistics partners deeply. Make deep demands in terms of the information that you require, in terms of sort of the level of service that you will receive. Don't just negotiate based on, there are 30 small transporters who are available and I can do this based on price. And so I rank order and select whoever I want. Because at precisely these moments, 29 out of those 30 are going to disappear. So our advice to clients has been outsource more. Doesn't matter whether you pick delivery or not. Pick somebody who's organized. Make sure you integrate deeply. Make sure you make clear service demands. And then make sure they stick to them.
I think that's a great thought, because I think you're investing in more and more in reliability in a volatile world. And that's really what people need to trust or look for when they find a partner like you. Vivek and PC, over to you guys. You've seen April looking good. How do you guys see the future? How are consumer trends going to be? Are they going to support you like they supported you in April? Are there dark clouds that you see?
So, okay, so I think the world will change. The definition of BC will be called now before COVID and after COVID. This is, I think, it will be there for a very long time. The one thing which we already started seeing is customer appreciation for quality will go up. So for example, the kind of investment we have done in brand and taking a commodity from unorganized to a organized space, I think already we are seeing that demand. We have even seen a lot of customers who ordered at some point of time in life and never ordered again have come back. I think so that I think is a long-term behavioral change we'll see. Whether we are seeing it in meat, I think some more categories should see that behavioral change. Some more consumer preferences, I think, will change for medium term. One is preference for home cooking, ready to cook categories like ID has, like we have complete marinated section, etc. I think this new trend will also be there, at least in medium term. Customer will look for trustworthy and credible choices, and maybe dine out, etc. will be slightly away. People will not like to crowd outside homes. So another thing is, I think online shopping behavior will change. It will go up. I think that surge will be there even for medium term and even long term. So these are the, I think, very, very quick, off the bat replies I think I can imagine. I think for startup ecosystem companies, as Kamal was mentioning, I think the only message I have is survive during this period, and then there will be a time to thrive back. All of us have to sail through these challenging times. Even companies like us, where we have cash, but we have learned very quickly new ways of running businesses. I think all of us will learn automatically the efficiencies, etc. Partnerships and collaborations on whether hiring or making everybody's extra resources efficient through some other models is going to be the new norm. And I really appreciate that we are already working on many of such models with various partners, both on the demand side, on the delivery side, on hiring side. I think that can be another way to navigate during next few months. Some of the companies like Bigbasket, like us, we are still hiring because we need manpower. And some of the companies, are, let's say, not able to afford. I think that is also can be very well collaborated during this time. So it is just, I think nobody's immune to COVID. It is just, we all have to together see through this time.
Great advice. PC, what are your observations?
I've been speaking about the fresh food revolution for the last couple of years. And that's something which we have not been noticing. Probably this is the best time for a fresh food revolution. And I think that we'll see that happening in the world on different platforms, including e-commerce platforms. I think we'll see a fresh food revolution happening across the world. We have seen that happening in China. I think we'll see that happening across the world. Because people become more health conscious and they need a reason to believe. And freshness is the most important reason for them to believe on the product lines. I think people will become more innovative. Many large businesses were born during this time. So my advice to the startup entrepreneurs out there would be, we all are going through this time, and this is the best time to innovate. Role of a businessman is to identify consumer pain points and solve it using common sense. And this is the best time to apply your common sense. Do not complicate, and innovate simple solutions to solve consumer problems. On a casual note, I was not able to get a haircut done for the last 2 months. I wish somebody come up with a helmet, right? Will get me automatic haircut. So I think we'll find such products coming up in the market soon, hopefully.
Yeah, and Hari is also promised to business now, so that helps.
Hari, I was actually talking about Bigbasket. Just pulling a leg, just because Bigbasket. Your backlog was so much. The fresh food was, you know, to support fresh food, not for ID. You are being strong supporter of ID. Keep supporting ID and keep eating idli every day, by the way.
Yeah, we are a strong supporter. Yeah, I'm a believer of your brand. So
thank you.
Kaval,
more innovation actually.
Kaval, turning to you, as an investor. Like many other investors, Fireside has money in the bank. What are your thoughts about investing? Should Fireside go slow, given all the uncertainty? What are the kind of changes that you're saying? What will excite you about investing in the F&B space?
So I think at the highest level, I would pretty much agree with what Sahil said. I think short term, there is slight more confidence that things will open up more. The first wave of relaxations will start. There is no choice. I think we will see lots of ups and downs. So people are calling it a W recovery. I think it could even be a multiple W recovery. So next 1 year, I would predict as being, a series of ups and downs, depending on how the spread happens, when the vaccine comes, and so on and so forth. So I think the first advice for startups and obviously for us as investors is to be very, very, sensitive and very almost tuned to this cycle of business. So it's not business as usual. And even the post-COVID, I think next 1 year is going to be a lot of, during COVID, post-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID kind of shocks. So being very agile, being very, almost ready to, take every up cycle and then quickly hunker down on the down cycle. I think there is going to be that kind of a phenomena which will happen, which may not be that significant for food and beverage companies because, there is a minimum requirement that is necessary. But for the rest of the companies in the broad, consumer space, it will be, significant up and down. Second, I feel that, the narrative for consumer brands and within that F&B per se, actually, I'm extremely optimistic. And I think that a lot of what has been said just now actually plays into all of those points, more consumer focus on hygiene, safety, trust on brands, the narrative of what the brands are bringing to the table, the desire to have more wellness and more good for you products, the home experiences, trying to, have those little moments at home, which people got very, caught up with their daily life and, not spending enough time at home. Even the little treats that you would have, to celebrate even the fact that you cooked a good meal or it's almost like, you're dressing up to go out that one time in the day maybe to buy some groceries. So, it's almost like the whole worldview is changing. And I think there is a lot of opportunity for companies to come in. And lastly, I feel that one area which has been neglected globally, if you ask me, and certainly in India, is the whole space of food and science. I think innovation, like PC said, not just in product, not just in business models, but also in fundamentally creating good products. And I think we have seen some of those experiences in global markets. Again, certainly meat is a big opportunity, but somebody like a Beyond Meat coming up with, a completely different product category itself. I think those kind of opportunities are going to come in. So as an investor, to answer your specific question, I think we are extremely bullish about the potential for businesses. And as a long-term investor, clearly our horizon is not 1 or 2 years. So we feel that right now is, like PC said, a great time for entrepreneurship, a great time for investing in exciting companies. As long as the narrative is not about the next 1 year of revenue targets, I think as long as we are looking at building fundamentally strong businesses over 4, 5, 6, 7 years, I would be extremely bullish overall in terms of the opportunities.
And what about valuations, Kanwal? How do you see valuations moving in term and in the longer term?
So I think in the short term, surely there is going to be a lot of, I would say, expectation of weakening of valuations. So companies that have raised money at very high valuations and who are struggling for cash are going to have to take some, deep cuts in numbers just to get the cash in the bank. But my sense is that, actually the concept of fundraising right now for companies is going to go back to basics. So at least in our worldview, where we are dealing with really startups and very young companies, I think we are not going to see a significant change because neither have valuations ever been so out of reach that, it always felt like there was a bubble. And I don't think valuations can or should become so, depressed that it becomes meaningless for the entrepreneur. So at least from our worldview, I don't see that, over the next 1 year, things are going to change. But if you can build the right foundations and if you can build the right business models, taking advantage of this, uncertain time and invest in, brand, invest in the right product, invest in the right channel choices, I think you can actually create a lot of value. And our belief as Fireside has always been that, let's focus on value and valuation will follow. So to me, this is a great time to almost reset and look at businesses on the fundamentals and not so much on, some projected valuations.
Okay, I think that what you're saying is it's a good time to get your business right, get the fundamentals of the business right, and valuations will follow. I think that's great advice, Kanwal. I have a bunch of questions which have come in. So some are marked to specific members of the panel, some are for the entire panel. So I'm just going to read out some of the questions and then, request one of you to pick up the questions. So one question is, what will be the impact on restaurants and food chains post-COVID as eating out culture will decline and people will spend less? I think we should also add, how should restaurants respond to all of this? Anyone who would like to have a stab at this?
Yeah, let me go, Kannan. I certainly feel next 6 to 12 months is not going to be a good time for restaurants. That's the honest answer. I do believe that consumers will be much more hesitant to go out and dine in restaurants. I think QSR chains, fast food outlets where a takeaway or certainly the opportunity for delivered services from the restaurant, I think those would be the key focus areas for the restaurants at this point of time. But, especially the fine dining, the more, higher end restaurants where you go for an experience, I think they probably will have a much tougher time to come back. I feel that a lot of the QSR chains, especially the the restaurants. And like I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of innovation going on. It's not only about tying up with the Swiggy or the Zomatos of the world. People are doing all kinds of ways of, so we have home chefs. People, I read today morning that some of the 5-star hotels have started using their kitchens and putting up menus which they will deliver to your homes. A lot of leverage on Dunzos and Swiggy. I'm sure Sahil will think of some interesting ways to create some delivery options. So I think consumption of food and having, like I call the little treats, and once in a while wanting to eat something different from your everyday cuisine is certainly even a more growing trend, because you're sitting at home and you're obviously getting bored. But going out and eating in restaurants will be a long recovery, I think.
Sahil, this is for you, and it does put you on the spot a bit. So Hari mentioned BB Accelerate, which is a program they have created to onboard and help young companies scale up on the Bigbasket platform. Would Delhivery be considering something like this for young companies?
So I think, first of all, let me clarify, of 99% of our clients are probably young companies to begin with, right? So there's that to start with. I think from our standpoint, I think companies that are starting up struggle with a couple of things. One is that they struggle with the ability to integrate and get sufficient information from their logistics providers. It's not always, a question of whether your price is 40 rupees or 50 rupees that makes or breaks the business that they're in. The problem is the inability to communicate with their customers and the inability to have the right kind of information. So the first thing that we are doing is we're going to be opening up our entire backend platform, effectively providing access to our entire backend platform and allowing companies to build on top of that, other partners potentially. So as an example, let's say you have a great inventory management solution or a great routing solution. We will provide the APIs for you to hook into our system and then provide that as a service to whoever you'd like. The second is also providing our service to all of our customers, which is, as an example, we have address verification, fraud verification, should I offer cash on delivery to this person or not? These are calls that we make. We will be offering this to all of our customers free of charge, effectively saying, look, plug these into your storefront so that you have better information. In terms of pricing itself and in terms of sort of the economics of the model, I think one of the things that we've been weighing off, and one of the things that was brought up by Kamal when we spoke to the Fireside companies, is that where there is a feeling from the companies that their volumes are going to be increasing rapidly over the next couple of months, we will put in place advanced pricing for future volumes. So effectively allowing them to take the benefit of those future volumes right now and to have lower shipping costs. Other than that, I think the only thing that I can think of is we've done, usually our credit limits for customers are usually about 5 days on COD. We will be able to bring that down to 3 days or lower, so that provides some working capital relief for our customers as well. And in some cases where our customers have been long-standing and have been working with us in good faith for a while, we are even waiving our charges for up to 3 months and saying you can pay us back much later once your income starts coming in, because they have a credit history. So I guess those are some of the areas. And from our standpoint as a company, we're not a financial investor, so we've not been as direct perhaps in terms of working with startups and investing behind them. But I think one of the things that we are considering more now is for startups which are related and in our space, we're starting to have a lot more conversations with saying, hey, how can we support you outside of just our network? We're also looking for opportunities to invest in a couple of companies that are in related spaces and that can provide services to multiple industries. As an example, I don't know if Vivek knows this, but we're having a conversation with Licious today, and we've never done meat delivery in our life. So we're trying to figure out if there's a way for us to work with somebody who's done meat delivery, expand that capability, and then go and offer it to the rest of the market. It's not something that Delhivery has done so far. So things like that.
Kannan, can I add a point here?
Go ahead, Kamal.
Yeah, sorry. So, what I was going to say, and Sahil, thanks for setting that context. We have been able to, because that's been our focus from a fund perspective, and the fact that we have 20 plus portfolio companies, etc., actually been able to work with partners like Hari, whether it's the BB Accelerate program or with Sahil and with a lot of the others, Amazon and Swiggy, etc. And we have been, always, in this frame of mind of saying, how can we help a bigger ecosystem of startups from some of the learnings and some of the relationships we have? And I think the participants on this forum would have filled in some, questionnaire about a forum that we are planning to create. So we do believe that, having somebody who has a vested interest in the startup ecosystem like us, we can probably create some kind of best practice, some kind of platform where a lot of these things which may not even be known to most of the community can become more proliferated, and that the how-tos and the practical ways of doing it. So I think the intent, and I must say this, really proud of the fact that every ecosystem player we talk to is very, very supportive in intent. And like Sahil said, actually taking action. Again, Hari has talked about BB Accelerate, which has been a very, very focused program. It's a question of how do you take that and actually make it more accessible, more available, and not just one or two companies, but as an overall ecosystem. So I think, again, from I'm just adding the Fireside point of view. I mean, we are very keen to be part of this solution finding kind of capability and allowing every startup to at least have a broad framework on how they can work with companies like Delhivery and Bigbasket, etc.
Great. I think we have, of course, done that with Bigbasket, but I can also see similar conversations going on with media houses like Facebook and Google. And I think that is, going back to the earlier discussion about a collaborative effort, I think that is already strong. And I think there is clearly an atmosphere which will enable even more collaboration across organizations in different parts of the ecosystem. Another question which is coming up, which is quite interesting, which is, I think, to the entire panel. It's really about the role of brands. In the sort of scarcity mindset that we have seen over the last month, people have been willing to trade off their favorite brands for anything that they can get in the category that they're looking for. And question is really, after the scarcity goes away, are we going to see a fragmentation of brand shares? Are the A brands going to be in a weaker position? Are private labels going to really get a big leg up? So what's the role of brands and brand loyalty after all that has happened over the last 1 month? Anybody who wants to pick it up?
Let me take a shot at this. I've been thinking about this for quite some time, and I'm fairly sure about one thing, that it's not going to change, right? 3 weeks doesn't change, brand loyalty, right? So what's happened right now is because of sheer availability issues, right? People are just picking up what they get, and this I'm 100% sure will not continue. People will come back a moment availability comes. Brand preferences, brand choices will go back to where they are. Will they explore new things, explore more? Of course they will, but this is a very, very short-term phenomenon, right? What you're seeing right now. And as I was saying earlier, hopefully if everything goes well, May 3rd, May 4th, even earlier, we don't know, moment, the assortment opens up, right? You will have everything available, right? From an assortment perspective. I'm coming back. The issue with brands is still production right now, right? Their ability to catch up and bring that back to normal, back to people, right? If all that opens up, they will produce what they're doing. People will continue buying what they were buying pre-COVID, right? I don't think that's going to change, at all. I'm seeing a huge movement towards health, right? That's one thing that's going to happen, right? It was already happening last year, Kannan. I think we chatted about it sometime. And there is a movement towards health, very clear movement, right? Millennials, young people focused right now on healthy food. And that is going to continue, right? And increase rather. But that's the only shift, I would say, so to say. But people will come back to their brands, right? Yeah, people who liked ID will buy ID. It's just that it may be available, not available today, but that's very temporary.
Any other views?
Yeah, Hari, I completely agree with Hari. I think one more point maybe want to top up.
PC, we lost you.
you're able to support your customers during this difficult period for life.
PC, I think you should put off your video.
Okay, I'll switch. Is it better now?
Yes.
Yeah, I completely agree with Hari. If a brand is able to support customers during these difficult times, this is the best time to build a brand.
Okay. So got you. In patches though, what you're saying is that this is the best time to build a brand, because if you reach out proactively to customers, they're going to love you for that and they're going to value you for that.
Yeah,
Network is bad. Yeah.
I think consumer preference towards safe and hygienic, and I think it will slightly upgrade rather than degrade, and people will prefer more I think credible choices in food.
And Vivek and PC, both of you are in the fresh food business. PC, you talked about how you think fresh food is going to be more important in the future. Kanwal, you talked about dining in as where it is going to be. What sort of F&B categories do you think are going to all benefit from these trends that are visible to all of us?
I think the broad thing can be anything which is convenient to cook. I think people will prefer to cook at home, and if we can come up with some innovative products which make cooking easier at home, so that I think can be a very obvious choice in at least the medium term.
PC, any thoughts on that?
I completely. We had a very high aggressive growth plans for this. Actually, planned to double our revenue from last year to this year, but we were doing scenario, and we believe actually we can do better this year. Our revenue mix, actually we had a higher priority plan for institutional sales, B2B. That may not be the case, but a product like tender coconut, this is probably the right time for us to take it to the market.
Interesting. So one last question. I don't know if you guys spotted it, but after many days, the headline in Economic Times was not on COVID, right? It was on Jio and Facebook. Any thoughts on how that is going to change the landscape?
So let me kick it off. I think it's a very dramatic possibility. I do feel that while Hari mentioned 1% going to 5% going to 10%, there is still a 80-90% of distribution which happens in the ecosystem of the offline trade. And what my understanding of this combination is going to do is really enable a completely different shopping experience, even at the small grocer level. So I think this will be a seminal change in the overall way of doing business and how consumers will interact. So in a way, it is increasing the overall pie of what you would call online or digitally enabled shopping, but obviously in a very different manifestation. So I think this is something which is all brands have to take strong note of and figure out what their channel strategy is. I think the other important thing, which just to answer the previous question, I think there is, while I agree brands loyalty, increasing focus on safety, trust in the brands, I think we should not underestimate the value of value. I think today consumers are going to have lesser money in the pockets. Now there is going to be overall recession. Let's not forget that next 2 years, people are talking about a significant recession and whatever growth rate of GDP. So every brand, every brand owner needs to seriously rethink on value. Is what do I offer? So it's not necessarily only price, but it has to be very deep rooted into saying the customer is looking for better value from my products. And I think that to me is the fundamental change in buying behavior. Of course, there will be focus on wellness and natural and healthy and all of that. I completely agree. But we have to also understand that it's not back to 7-8% economic growth. And whatever the government does, and when they do the fiscal thing, people are going to have less money in their pockets. So I think that and this, enabling the local retailers to become more e-enabled, I think those are the two structural changes I feel which will have a significant impact over the next, not even next 1 or 2, but several years.
Other points of view?
Go
for it, Hari.
I've got a few million calls since last evening, since the time it's got announced, saying what's going to happen, how's it going to impact, Bigbasket, blah blah. I have this view. This is the 95% part of the business, right? The 95% part of the business is very different from that 5%. Very different, right? Sheer fact that the 5% behaves in a it's a larger basket, it's a larger range. Behavior is very different, right? And if you look at the 95%, what has always happened to the 95% is that they've always delivered home. They've always been very, very customer friendly, blah, blah, blah. This changes that game completely, right? I think it becomes, lot more digital, lot more predictable, right? I am hoping, of course, there will be deep inventory integration, because otherwise it will fail, because it's not going to work with poor fill rates, etc. So if you don't know what what's available and don't know what you're ordering and what you'll get finally, and that's where the whole hyperlocal business kind of completely collapsed, because there was no integration. I'm presuming technology will take them there, but it's not an easy task to kind of integrate to millions and millions and millions of such store and make inventory, for example, visible. But assume that will happen. I think that's a game changer for that 95%, complete game changer. So the way people will order, the frequency of ordering, buying will change, right? Because you're a lot more predictable, and it's going to help that business quite a bit. But fundamentally, I think the way the 5% behaves and the way the 95% behaves are very different, right? There are what customers look for in that 5% side are very, very different, right? You're looking at larger baskets, larger range, variety, etc., etc. So to that extent, I think it will make the 95% lot more efficient, lot more efficient, and will also grow that pie. And both the pies, I think, will coexist and grow. And I think it's a significant game changer in that 95. That's the way I look at it.
Great. I think the pie will grow is I think a last great message to the 1,300 odd people who are there in the audience. So let me end this webinar by thanking all of you. I know all of you are very busy people. You've got lots of things to do with all the issues around us. But thank you very much for taking out the time to share all your experiences. I'm sure it's been invaluable for all the people listening to you. A shout out to the audience today. I know many of you have said that you would like to stay in touch with Fireside and with other startups. So on the screen, you can see our contacts, our email ID, and of course, our social media handles. So do write in to us if you want to check something out with us. We're also at Fireside working on developing a startup community, and we'll come back to you with more details on this. And finally, I think my heartfelt thanks to everybody who has been working backstage, the team at Fireside and the team at TIE for pulling this together in a flawless way. Thank you very much, all of you, for attending this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.